Hi, I'm James Wise, partner at Balderson Capital, and welcome to What's Next, an interview series with founders working at the cutting edge of new technologies. Today we're talking to Bobby Healy, the CEO and founder of Manna Aero. Manna's on a mission to change the way we do deliveries using aerial drones. He's already operating in geographies as diverse as Dublin, Ireland, and Fort Worth, Texas, and today we discuss how drone deliveries work, how Manna makes them safe, and how he thinks deliveries will completely change in the decade to come. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us here at What's Next.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the obvious question. What's Manna Aero?
Manna Drone Delivery is a mini airline that uses flying robots to replace road-based delivery with better economics, faster, greener, quieter, safer, obviously more exhilarating, but in the end, a full replacement for road-based delivery in suburbs.
I mean, it's an incredible vision. So maybe we can unpack that a little bit first. When you talk about flying robots, you mean drones. So what is that to the average person? What is the drone and what is it you're delivering today?
So the drone, I mean, everyone knows what a drone is. Ours are much bigger than you'd expect, and they're cargo drones. So they have a delivery cargo bay inside. They're big and they're flying about 85 kilometers an hour. And we're delivering everything today and we've been delivering for 3 years. Delivering coffee is our number one thing we deliver, hot coffee, but also burgers and fries, takeaway food, soon parcels, one-way parcel delivery, everything. So if you think about a suburban community with 100,000 to 1 million people, everything that they need, quickly or in a latent way, for example, pharmacy delivery we do as well. Our vision is that everything you need from your local suburban neighborhood, we will be bringing you. We'll have a relationship with every single suburban household on the planet.
And we've obviously shown some video at the start of this series, the start of this interview, of the drones in action, and so people will get an idea of that. But maybe you could just describe, what is the size of the drones you're operating today? And you mentioned, right, you're doing coffee today. How much are they going to be able to carry? Maybe in the near future.
So drones actually about the size of this table we're sitting at. So they're big, 1.8 meters motor to motor, and they're quiet as well. And so big is good when you're a drone because your props are much bigger, your disc loading is much better. So you can't hear us when we're flying, when we're cruising over you, which is a critical thing that we're solving. And also big is good because you can carry big cargo. So our latest aircraft carries 3.5 kilos, so about 8 pounds. Volumetrically about 25 to 30 liters. So we can carry the single basket convenience store market, one of those metal baskets full of stuff, 8 pints of Guinness, 4 Happy Meals. You go through a list, but it's the way to think about the design of the aircraft. Once you get safety and efficiency equations where you want them, you think about the 90th percentile of demand. And so for takeaway food, we're already way over the 90th percentile. For grocery, we're a little bit less, but the great thing about autonomous robots is if you order 6 kilos from us instead of 3.5, we just fly 2 robots within 60 seconds of each other. And actually, it's a software orchestration problem then, because your marginal cost for delivery is inconsequential. So therefore, you don't address the 98 or 99 percentile of demand with the robot. You address some number less, so long as you can use orchestration to fix the other 10%.
So you don't have the traveling salesman problem, the classic sort of machine learning problem that, say, an Ocado van might have, where they have to work out, okay, which household do I go to when?
Yeah.
You can go directly.
Correct, point to point, literally in a straight line, unless there's precious areas like graveyards, schools, things like that we bypass. And we do certain clever optimization stuff to mitigate ground risk, like we won't fly over the same place or we'll avoid known popular places, things like that. But, we're about 98% efficient, nearly always a straight line. And that's critical because, complexity is your enemy if you're in hardware. So you want it to be not complex, so therefore your battery needs to be small. Everything needs to be shrunk, light and reliable because you need redundancy. So we have 2 battery systems, we have 3 flight computers, everything is doubled or tripled. So therefore you're really optimizing to the edge and you want to be traveling 4 kilometers in that straight line in your flight envelope, meaning for us it's a 10 meter per second to 15 meter per second gusting wind. And rain is easy, wind is hard, so you're on the edge of the energy thing. So we can fly 97% of Irish weather, which, fun fact, don't ever build a drone delivery business in Ireland.
Yeah, you're
but you
starting
do get
with the edge cases.
Yeah, you do get a free wind tunnel for testing with. So you need to think differently, but it all comes from backwards from three things: safety first, availability. In other words, if you want to replace road-based delivery, you need to be available 97% of the time. There's no point having 70% of the time, because your partners, your restaurants and so on need to provide an alternative when you can't fly, right? That's not a business. And then the second and the third thing then is unit economics. Like we always say this, and I always bang this drum: we're not a drone delivery company. We are a delivery company with better economics than any other delivery company. So you're working towards efficiency of the aircraft, and that actually determines the architecture of the aircraft. So hot swap batteries, super fast turnaround time. So look at the way Ryanair build their business, aggressive look at cost, but they also think about process, and the architecture of your aircraft needs to suit whatever process you choose. So we've done all of that.
And so the vision, I guess, is to be the Ryanair of delivery, but rather than transporting people at the lowest possible cost and highest convenience, it's going to be packages.
Correct, except a lot bigger than Ryanair. It's a much bigger opportunity than traditional aviation.
And to go back to the start here, so I think for a lot of people listening, I think they will really be amazed that you can order coffee and have it delivered by drone today, right? This isn't something we're talking about happening in 5 years' time. It's today. And to your point, thanks to the great work you've done at Manna, it's also cost efficient, which is kind of amazing.
Yep.
So where is this happening today?
Just on that cost efficient thing, every one of our flights is profitable now. So it's happening in Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Dublin. And those two places, for good reason. Dublin's population, we can reach about 1.2 million people with 10 suburbs in Dublin. So it's Goldilocks type density, supply density, demand density. And we want to be a winner in the United States, so we've got footprint in Texas. So when you look at regulatory space, and we're regulated by aviation regulators, the two big regulators are EASA Europe and FAA for USA. So if you crack those two nuts, you have the two biggest opportunities in one. And it's the same tech, obviously, same process. So
and that experience with getting the regulator on board, how did you find that? Because this is a big shift for people's way of thinking about delivery. I think a lot of people will think about drone delivery and think, oh my God, are the skies going to be full of these flying robots delivering people's coffee?
Yeah. It's funny, one of our structural advantages is that we're in Ireland, where we have a regulator, one's the largest regulators in Europe, because 90% of transatlantic flights fly over our airspace. So we have an industrial regulator there with a very pro-business government. So those two things together mean that our relationship with the regulator is an expedient one. It's one where the regulator is joined up with us in wanting this to be successful. So they see it as much a win for them as it is for us. And usually regulation is a bad word, just ask the AI people in Europe particularly. But in our case, regulator is the unlock. So what we're capturing here is the opportunity with regulatory unlock. And we happen to be in the best country on the planet to start that off. So Europe is a great market, but it's limited. But the regulations are starting to look very, I would say, harmonized between what Europe is doing, what the UK is going to be doing, and what the United States is doing. So, but the relationship with the regulator is a tough one as well, because in the end, it's aviation and aerospace. So you really have to know your stuff, and you have to speak a particular language, not of tech, not of cool, not of performance, just of boring facts and safety and proven numbers. So it's confidence building and trust. The industry, aviation has a standard phrase: crawl, walk, run. And you do that. You don't say, hey, we think we can do this, we're going to try it out. It's all about what's the best way we can move forward safely each time. And that takes time. So when you look at a business like ours, and when you talk about what is the moat, right? Of course, there's tech, there's people, there's time, there's a bunch of things. But the biggest moat is one that cannot be covered in, which is trust with regulation. And trust takes time, flight hours, not simulations, none of this stuff. It's about taking the regulator hand in hand through your process, your hardware, your software, your ops, and iterating those such that each license you get is wider and wider and wider. And soon you've got a real business. And that's what we have now.
And do you want to talk a little bit about the concerns that the regulator may have had in working with you on this, right? Because I think, if you come at the idea of drone delivery from a completely cold perspective, your concerns will be safety. Are these things going to fall out of the sky? Noise. Are these things going to distract everyone? And security. Are these things, when they land, can someone run off with in this case, hot coffee, but over time, it's going to be a lot more valuable to you than that.
Yeah. So what the regulator cares about, the regulator's remit is, and it's a KPI, is how many people get injured or killed with this license. That's it. That's the way they look at Boeing or Airbus or any of those guys, in the same way they look at us. So their remit is to protect the general public. And so they bring that into two categories. One is ground risk and one is air risk. Ground risk, obvious, right? It's just engineering. And believe it or not, they care less about ground risk than they do air risk. Ground risk is when we crash and hit someone on the ground. It's a spreadsheet of mean time between failures, a hazard matrix of probabilities, and you add them all up and you get a number.
And do they compare that against the risks and injuries caused by ground delivery and say, well, you have to?
Unfortunately, no. And we know that a ground-based delivery driver is 6 times more likely to be involved in an accident. You see, we've already done, in 1 month, we've done about 45,000 kilometers of flight in this area. And that's about 70 to 80,000 kilometers of road journeys we've removed. And with all the consequent risk that they come with, going through, estates with children playing on the roads, all that stuff. Nobody looks at that. And if you remember Uber's, autonomous driving unit, they had one accident and it's all over. Nobody got to say, well, this is way safer than the alternative. We have to be aviation levels of safety for ground risk. And then air risk is what they really take seriously, because it's very difficult in a deterministic way to say that you're safe, right? It has to be empirical, right? But how do you collect data without flying? So there's a cart horse problem, and that's where COVID comes in. Because during COVID, we had all these lockdowns, we had all these special situations where we were able to fly, collect hours, and demonstrate that our systems could guarantee that we would never leave we call it geo tunnel. So when we fly in a 4D tunnel, like 3D over time tunnel. And we've done now about 180,000 flights where we've never left the tunnel. And that's because you've got redundancy and various different controls and different modes, different sensors, what I would say, for detecting where you are. And those are hard to prove without actually, simulations don't work in our world. So you have to fly. So again, no amount of documentation will make a regulator feel very safe. They will want you to spend time and hours collecting data, use an evidence-based approach. And so that's why it's taken us 5 years to be even close to being a real company. All the other companies I've built have been 1 year, we're generating revenue and we're nearly profitable. Software, right? Easy. But this is much harder because time, you have to spend time to do it. It's not that it takes time, you have to spend time. It's very different. So it's the reason I got into this business is because it was so hard, and because I knew that if you got there and your timing was right, nobody's going to touch you, because the incumbent advantage with market share is going to be very, very difficult to beat.
I think your perspective there on the reasons to do a hard tech business like this, and also the defensibility of it, are really powerful. And we'll come back to discussing the differences between what you were doing beforehand and what you're doing now, which are quite substantial in a bit. But just to lean into what you're doing today. So when we looked at the drone delivery space maybe a couple of years ago, we thought, well, it makes sense for really urgent deliveries, which are very high value. So blood, for example, and medicines, right? Where it's at almost any cost, you need this to work. And I think there's some countries in the world where actually it's working pretty well for those kind of use cases, where there's very, very high hills, or there's not great ground infrastructure. But today you're making it work for the price of a coffee, which is pretty amazing. What's changed over the last couple of years that's meant that drone delivery now does work and is cost effective?
I think so. It's not tech. I mean, battery tech, sensors, MEMS, GPU, all those things have been available for quite some time. I think the big opening has been regulatory. So it's easy to fly in Africa medical delivery, subsidized. It's never going to make a penny. It's always going to lose money, but it's a great service, right? Great humanitarian use of drones, and I love it. But that's, for me, not an interesting business. We want to build the biggest company Europe or the world has ever seen. And so when you think those terms, it means you need to have a relationship with every household on the planet that you can reach. So you don't do that with medicine. We have medicine delivery, pharmacy delivery, and it's less than 0.2% of our volume. It's not a business. Like, again, it all comes back to, you run an airline, so therefore utilization is absolutely key of your staff that are operating the aircraft, and loading the aircraft, and of the aircraft and space itself. So we look at all the different use cases, but we're very attracted to highly perishable goods because the advantage we bring. And if food delivery today, top 4 aggregators in the world do 5.2 billion deliveries a year. Half of them we can reach with suburban delivery. And that's growing at 15% annually. And it's a business or an industry that suffers from rotten unit economics, rotten scale issues, employment labor issues, cost of labor issues, quality, customer NPS issues. It's just a horribly difficult industry to make work. So when I started to look at this space, I wasn't thinking about drones at all. I was thinking about what's the way to solve this gigantic problem. And there's software solutions to optimize and batching, all these things, traveling salesman, as you said. But then imagine if you could fly at 85 kilometers per hour in a straight line and your marginal cost was $1 or $2, whereas the cost of a delivery now in Europe is $6.50. And we're already there. We're already less than half the price of road-based delivery. So then you say, okay, well, what's in the way of that being the right way to do things? So I go into a lot of schools as part of the kind of education campaign, and there's not a child under the age of 12 that thinks it's sensible to use a 3-ton vehicle with a person to deliver a hamburger. And the kid doesn't even see the drone as, well, of course they see it as cool, but they see it as the correct way to do delivery. And all of our first deliveries are from kids. And then if you look at the economics of it, I mean, a drone, the marginal, our cost of delivery is already less than half what it takes that person in the car. Labor laws, labor costs are going in the wrong direction. So it's never been a good idea to use people to carry hamburgers around, or coffee for that matter. And the NPS of these services is awful. Our NPS is high 80s, early 90s for 3 years. People love what we're doing. But it all boils down to, is it viable technically, commercially, to do it the way we're doing it, and what's different about cars versus what we're doing? And on absolutely every axis, drone delivery beats road-based delivery on every axis. But the only axis I care about is unit economics axis. And we're already at half the cost of a road-based delivery, with a path to about 10% of the base cost of a road-based delivery, which means that we can completely change the nature of demand. If you think about how often a household gets a delivery, most of the time when it's raining and it's the weekend, they just can't get one. So demand is constrained already in the market of 5.2 billion orders. So we know that when we're ubiquitous, and this is just as easy as picking up a phone to do something, we're going to completely change the nature of demand in suburban.
And initially, because you talk about being able to serve half the market that the major food delivery companies can serve. You mentioned suburban a few times. So today, what is the setup where it really makes sense to get a drone delivery? Is it that you have a garden or a patio where you can land one of these things? And how in the long run might you also do dense urban environments, if you can do them at all?
So again, this very useful prop in front of us here, that's a drone delivery location. That's what we need.
So it needs to be this big.
Yeah.
This is it.
It's actually a little bit bigger, so 2 meters diameter, flat, inanimate space, so less than 15-degree angle if we're delivering beverages, or any angle if we're not. And so therefore you think high density suburbs. So you want this kind of nice marriage of demand, supply, volume, right? So we want to fly about a 4-kilometer radius. We can fly much further, but for productivity of the takeoff space, we want to fly 4 kilometers, 3 miles. And that's 300 million of the 500 million people in Europe we think we can deliver to, and 92 million suburban homes in the United States we can deliver to with our eyes closed. So that's the easy stuff that we want to do for the first 10 years and win there. Urban is possible, but it's going to need a little bit more Well, first of all, you can't deliver to a balcony, right? Horizontal delivery is never going to be safe. It's just too complex to make safe. And so the conversations we're having now with architects, construction firms, and so on and they come to us and they say, what can we do to make our buildings compatible with drone delivery? So those conversations are happening now. And over time, there isn't a building that's going to go up without having thought about drone delivery. But you are thinking 10-year time frame, not 2 or 3 year time frame. And which is fine. I mean, as I said, like if you look at DoorDash, more than half their deliveries are suburban, and they're 2.5 billion deliveries a year. We're going to be busy enough scaling into billions of deliveries over the next 10 years that we don't need to care about urban. And then the other lens to look at urban is, we're in the middle of London here, or New York, San Francisco. The traveling salesperson thing and batching works for the delivery platform. So their economics are reasonable in very dense urban locations because they only have to travel 500 meters, maybe a kilometer, and it works. So that's always going to be less of an emergency for those guys to solve than what we're solving. And we just think we can transform all of those aggregator businesses. Every order we fly is going to save them money and deliver a better user experience, and just LTV, churn, everything is going to improve because of our service.
And what I'm really excited about is obviously you'll make the unit economics better and that may expand the market. But actually, for small startups and competitors, and I'm not talking necessarily just about sort of high scaling software businesses, I'm talking about people who want to start their own business. Shipping is still a major constraint. It's one of the reasons why Amazon is both Amazon Marketplace is great for small businesses, but it's also a real danger for them relying on it too much because they don't understand how to do their own shipping practices. So hopefully, if we can make suburban shipping $1 or less for certain products through drone delivery, you'll unlock a whole new category of people who can start their own store from home.
Oh yeah. I mean, my seed deck had all of that in it. I had to take it all out because it's too crazy. But so what we're creating is peer-to-peer movement of things, right? So, somebody that's living in a suburban community of 200,000 people could be baking brown bread. And that's a business now. With robotic delivery, that's a business. Because everyone in that neighborhood is going to have a subscription to Manna. It's not going to be transactional. It's going to be relationship driven. So I think Amazon Prime for suburban communities, powering small businesses and big businesses alike. When you forward wind, and if you experience our product, that actually makes sense. I know it's crazy, sounds crazy now, but there's no reason someone couldn't be making artisan ice cream at home and having a great business doing that, because you have discovery, you have online transaction. The only thing that breaks every single business is last mile logistics, and we fixed that.
When you think about the constraints on the business today as to the people you can serve, you've mentioned regulatory, but what's your perspective on how the drones will change over the next decade? Do you think they're going to be able to, we're going to have different lengths of flight, we're going to have heavier cargoes? Like, what do you think the format that you're working with will look like in 10 years' time?
I think there's a number of answers to that question. I definitely think groceries is something that we would love to solve, heavy groceries, but that doesn't work with the current battery energy density. We can make that work later on. And then you think about smaller long range drones. So you think about if you really want to win, you have to address other use cases that may not be in the sweet spot of margin or scale, anything like that. So think a big airline, right? A big airline will often fly routes that it doesn't need to fly or shouldn't, just to kind of be more relevant to everybody more of the time. And when we put that lens on, if we want to be more relevant to more people all of the time, we'll have to fly further. And those flights are really inefficient. I mean, we can fly further now, but we choose not to. So I think the developments in battery, both in cost and in energy density, will allow us to power that 20-mile flight. And then you think about what does that enables changes in the way populations organize themselves. So suddenly the advantages of urban living, even the advantages of suburban living over rural living, we start to, create more balance there. And so you could be living in a rural community with absolutely nothing around you, but yet have access to a pharmacy, a late night pharmacy, a bar. We can deliver Guinness, anything you want, so long as we solve the range problem. And so I do see that being a part of our future. It'll start in about 5 years when we've already, had a significant presence in most cities. We're going to start looking at those outlier towns, smaller towns, and we're going to want to serve them. But it's all enabled by, really, bottom line is it's enabled by battery energy density.
And if you look at this sort of history of transportation, where people live really has been built around people's access to transportation, right? I think, the train lines determined which cities and towns survived and which didn't. The Industrial Revolution, the car completely changed our idea of living, and suburbs could only really exist because of the car, because then people could commute and get goods back and forth. And now you have this new mode of transportation coming to the fore in drones, which, I agree with you, may completely change the way that some people decide where they live.
And we need no infrastructure. Like we fly anywhere. We need absolutely nothing where we deliver to. So you enroll with us, you drop a pin, which is a GPS coordinate for us. We have maps, satellite maps of the whole world. So we have everything we need. And then we use edge sensors when we get there to make sure the area is safe. So we need nothing. So you can be living in the middle of nowhere and have everything that a suburban dweller has.
And does that include transportation of people, you think, in the future?
I mean, I think that's what a lot of companies have been trying to solve. And certainly that's a more fun space for everyone to think about. More fun than hamburgers is flying around, of course. But it's a more difficult problem to solve for two reasons. One is the regulatory path of flying people versus hamburgers is very, very different. It's a 10 to 20 year path to certify an aircraft that carries passengers. And that is still a path that requires a person in the cockpit. And you're not going to see the pilot removed from an aircraft anytime soon. So that's a big problem that industry has. And then the other one is just physics, right? I mean, carrying heavy people around, including a pilot and maybe a bit of luggage, with the current cost and productivity of a battery, it's a little bit not there yet. So there are use cases for sure, short flights, low altitude flights. But I still believe it's going to work, but it's 10 years away from being real business, I think.
Yeah, and I think that obviously the levels of testing that we have to do if we're pushing people around in sort of these VTOL style drones is much, much higher.
For sure. It's certificated, but the nice thing is regulators are set up for that because you're a helicopter. So they have all the tests for you to pass. There's a path. There's a very clear path to get an aircraft certified. Even Pipistrel had a battery aircraft certified. So regulators know how to do this, but the problem is they know how to do this. And therefore, you got to follow their path, not some tech path that you think you can follow. It's a 10 to 20 year path to certify a passenger aircraft.
And at the very extreme end, if you look at what SpaceX managed to achieve in reducing the cost of getting a kilogram of cargo into low Earth orbit, do you think there'll also be a category of delivery where it makes sense to send stuff up and bring it back down somewhere else?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think going vertical is the hardest thing you can do because gravity is a constant and it's expensive to beat gravity. So I don't see that certainly not in our world. It's always going to be below 500 feet. Maybe someone will try that, to habitants on the moon or on Mars or something. Elon definitely will. The problem we're solving technically is much easier. I think that, what we've done a very good job of is operations, the boring stuff. Like I keep saying, we're a delivery company. We're not a drone delivery company. The tech is hard. The regulatory is hard. But our unit economics, nobody can touch our unit economics. I sound like Michael O'Leary, but it's true. Nobody is within touching distance of what we're able to achieve in operational efficiency. 8 deliveries per hour per aircraft, moving to 9 deliveries per hour per aircraft. The closest to us is 1.4 deliveries per hour per aircraft. So you have to think logistics, not technology, as well as technology.
And beforehand, you spoke about how difficult building this business has been, right? It's not like a matter of accelerating the speed at which you could have done this, because there was just a certain matter of hours in the air you need and learnings that you had to get to before you could really operate a business at a certain level of unit economics. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you were doing before this and how you ended up starting at Manna.
Oh, before I started Manna?
Yeah.
I was running a business called Car Trawler for 15 years, travel tech, mobility aggregator. great business, just kept growing. As hard as I tried to not let it grow, it just kept growing almost on its own. Easiest business I ever ran. Travel is great because, it's child's play to build a successful platform there, because you have a very consolidated enterprise customer base called airlines and OTAs. And if you know a problem that they have, and they all have it, and you can solve it, it's just a matter of building code. Like I built half the code for CarTrawler at the start. It took about 6 months. It's just so easy. And your cost of, startup and your access to the customers, like, just so easy. 15 years, in the last 6, I was bored. And before that, I built a company called Eland, which was a travel technology business. Probably should have said I'm a programmer. That's my skill. And Eland was also a travel technology business. And again, it was like boringly easy. And I just, when I looked at Manna, when I was on the board of CarTrawler for a long time, and I loved the team and everything. And obviously the success was great. But it wasn't, for me, the big moonshot project of my life. I'm certainly not going to be talking about CarTrawler at my funeral, or nobody is, should I say. But they're going to be talking about Manna. This is the biggest thing I could imagine building. And it's not the hardest thing, but it's close to the hardest thing I could imagine building. And I wanted something that was 1 million times the size of CarTrawler. And that's why I chose it. I wasn't willing to I was no interest in building something that just makes a ton of money. I wanted to build something that genuinely is the biggest thing ever since sliced bread. And I found it. And it's just got this beautiful Goldilocks situation where you have a gigantic delivery market that is slightly constrained but still growing, with terrible unit economics, a terrible problem. The world wants efficient last mile delivery, and I don't know why, but nobody seems to have noticed that drones are the answer to it. And I just, compared to everything I've done, and I've been building startups for 35 years, nothing compares to this in level of difficulty, level of opportunity. And I'm delighted to say now that it's now a viable business. More money that goes into this business, the more comes out. It's a positive number we're multiplying now, not a negative one.
But that move from moving bits around with software to moving atoms around with drones, I mean, that's a huge leap to have taken for someone who's got a programmer as a background, I presume.
Yeah.
So what do you think you've had to do to yourself as a leader and the way you think about building a business to have made that move from being a programmer and then a CEO of a software business to what is now a logistics business with a really hard tech backbone?
So first of all, it is a software business. Nearly all of our stack now and going forward is going to be software and optimization. So software for logistics, think Flexport, but on another scale. So I see this as a software problem. And if you look at all the optimizations we've done, all of the safety stuff we've done to get us our license, it's all software. So airspace management, airspace coordination, we've connected our systems to Google's, Amazon's, Ziplines, everybody else's, all that software. And software is our first language, right? My CTO came with me from CarTrawler. It's software I could do my eyes closed, and there's zero risk of execution in software. And I also see software as a differentiator in this space. So, you could devise a process. Logistics is not rocket science, right? It's about, you can measure your success, right? And if you work towards particular KPIs, you can develop processes that can be turbocharged with software. So I always saw this as, your advantage is going to be in software development here, your execution advantage. And then hardware, I said, okay, right, that was a bit, I won't say intimidating, but as the startup guy, you try to do things that you have a natural advantage at. There's no point trying to do things you're not good at. And definitely, I know nothing about hardware. I know what a capacitor and a resistor is. That's about it. So that was a weakness. And the way you address that, and then you do play to your strength, is I'm good at finding people and hiring them and getting them to believe in the mission. And you start at the fundamentals. You say, break down the problem into domains, into technical domains. So there's aerospace, there's avionics, there's sensors. There's a bunch of things, right, to make a drone work. And those are well-known disciplines, engineering disciplines, electrical, mechanical, aerospace, so on. So actually, you don't need to know inside. You just need to know what are the building blocks for the product, and then it's easy to find the people. And you try to get a couple of gems that are very special, but actually, hardware is nice thing about hardware is it's parallel, right? So we have 11 subsystems on the aircraft, and they can all go at full speed. The more people you put into them, the faster each goes, and there's almost no interdependencies. Whereas with software, the interdependencies are exponentially complex, right? So you get the inverse of ROI on each additional person with software versus hardware. So hardware has its luxuries. It's iterative, yes. It's difficult. It's expensive. So it takes more elapsed time. But if the problem is if there's multiple hardware problems to solve, they all go in parallel. So that's an advantage. But it was the one bit of the business where it didn't play to my strengths, other than hiring people. But on the flip side, for all the founders that are listening to this, it's way more fun to build a business that's both hardware and software. Way more fun. All my future businesses will be something like that, maybe another Anduril or something like that. But hardware is great, and orchestration of hardware with software is even better. And then when that orchestration involves load balancing of aircraft and all the stuff with logistics that interacts with human beings on the other side, is like next level fun.
But you've drawn the line to date, at least, in going out and building a Manna drone, right? A specific drone just for what your use case are. So you integrate with the platform rather than replace it fully. So you're going slightly more horizontal than full stack. Like you're not going full Tesla. You're thinking more of it as a platform today. How have you drawn that line? Why isn't there a Manna drone out there yet?
I think, first of all, if there was a drone available commercially that you could buy that could be licensed, we'd be doing that, because it'd be dumb to build your own drone if there was already one commercially available. And in one sense, that's a pain because you have to go through that process and build and get regulated. But on the other hand, that's not the moat, but it's a big part of the moat. So would we license Manna Drone? No, because it's core IP and it's a massive differentiator. Is our drone the best drone in the world? Not at all. Doesn't need to be. It needs to be not even the safest drone in the world. It needs to be safe enough to be regulated. So it isn't about the drone. It's about the orchestration of the various technologies that map onto something that's better than what's currently being done. And if I say it another way, like there's lots of drone manufacturers, and some of them are niche engineering companies, some of them are military, some of them are in China, like DJI, Unique and stuff, that are at scale with beautiful consumer grade drones. They're not the competition, and we're not in that market. So like our drones cost a fortune to make, but they have a useful life. They'll produce over $1 million of revenue in their lifetime. So it isn't about the cost of the drone or the coolness or the performance of the drones. Not about any of that. Can it get from A to B safely? Is it a low maintenance cost? In other words, do you need humans all the time looking at the drone, watching the drone? So it's about building something that's fit for purpose, for reliability and low unit cost. And nobody needs that today because there are no drone delivery businesses in the world.
And when you think about that shift to drone delivery businesses, increasingly taking over the number of deliveries an individual takes, what impact do you think that's going to have on people who work in the logistics industry? How do you think that the traditional logistics industry today is going to change? And is it something you're concerned by?
So if you look at Amazon's drone delivery program, why did they create that? Because the man in the van can go out with 200 parcels, traveling salesman route, and the cost per parcel there is very low. And so that seems to work, and why bother changing it? And the same with the post office, the postal service, whatever, man in the van, even an electric van, everything's working, it's not broken, don't fix it. I understand that, but and Deliveroo, Just Eat, DoorDash and so on, it's working. You might argue it's in rude health because it's growing and stuff, but it's not. It's the wrong way to do it. And it's the wrong way to do with a man in a van for most things. For most things, a man in a van is fine. But there's plenty of cases where, high priority parcels or just the man in the van environment doesn't work. So if you think about a postal service, well, why doesn't a man in a van bring the 300 parcels to us? And we use our unused capacity to fly them to customers' houses. That's a much better way to do it, because it's probably 400 kilometers of van miles removed every day. And now, where's a man in the van go? Well, the man in the van means that they can produce or send a lot more parcels. And similarly, the Deliveroo driver, and I get Deliveroo drivers coming up to me all the time asking them, am I going to remove their job? No, I'm going to transform their job. I'm going to make one of our people can do 30 deliveries an hour. One road-based delivery person be lucky to do 3 deliveries an hour. So what I would say to those drivers, delivery people, we're going to transform you into a different job that's far more productive, and we're going to transform local businesses that are 10x more efficient and more productive and have more demand than before. So do I worry about job destruction? No. Do I worry about job displacement? No. I look forward to all the job transformation that this thing will bring. And it's so obvious that it's going to bring it. We've already demonstrated where we're operating.
And one last question. I think there is a very exciting future here, but there's also a load of big questions we need to answer socially, right? The noise pollution, the potential impact on birds and sort of wildlife as a whole. What will our skies look like if Manna's successful? Is that something that people are going to be happy with?
Oh yeah, that's such an interesting one, and I get asked that all the time. And I break it down. People's chief concerns about drone delivery are noise, privacy, visual litter, as they call it, like the scooter industry. And luckily for us, none of them are real issues. They're perception issues. So noise, there's absolutely you can't hear our drone when we're flying at cruise speed. Nobody looks up in the towns we operate in, and that's a good test. And we spend about 27 seconds at a delivery. So noise is not an issue, and it's the biggest perceived one. Privacy is obviously not an issue. We don't record anything. We have no customer data, but you got to be very upfront about it. So when you talk to me about what the problems are, there's no real actual problems that are going to hold us back, but there's a lot of perceived ones. And the wildlife's another one. Right? We have 170,000 flights under our belt, and the only thing that's ever happened is seagulls look sideways at us. Birds know that we're not a threat. They know that we're not a bird, so that's not an issue. And then the visual clutter thing. A lot of people wonder at scale, in 20 years' time, is this some awful scene where there's just non-stop robots flying around the sky? And we already know the answer to that. We already know what consumption and demand looks like in suburbs. We know housing density, we know supply density. And the truth is, where we operate now, where we're doing max 1,000 flights a day, that's over 13 hours, and that's on a 40 square kilometer area, you hardly ever see a drone. Unless you're getting a delivery or your neighbour's getting one, there's no visual litter. There's so much bandwidth in the sky, and it's 3-dimensional bandwidth, and it's over time, that there's not going to be a litter problem at all.
Yeah, look, it's an incredibly exciting, firstly, moment for the business, so that you can really prove now that this unit economics works. I think it's a really exciting thing for so many people to think about what they could do if logistics became incredibly cheap and safer and faster for certain types of goods and certain types of environments. I think it's something which unlocks a huge amount of more entrepreneurial opportunities and just will improve a lot of people's lives in hard to reach areas, right? We didn't talk about people in remote areas who don't get that postal service or that Amazon service, by the way. There's a lot of people who don't get that, which now may be unlocked by the kind of things you're building. So that productivity increase, that well-being increase for people, I think is exceptional. It's a really exciting time for the business. And, I'm really happy that interviewing an Irishman, I got multiple mentions of both Guinness and Ryanair, two fine exports from that country. And Manna is going to be one of them as well. So Bobby, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Pleasure.